this has been the biggest challenge of my life, honestly, in every in every sense, and the longest project I have worked on, because the idea for this novel started really when I was a grad student. And because my major was in Latin American political theater and my minor was in Spanish comedia of the golden age, but the comedia that was also political, where the playwrights were somehow exposing again the unfairness that women were facing at the time, the way they were mistreated, raped, abused, silenced. There are many plays, many comedias that deal with this matter in a very clear way. And so I was looking into that, and as I was reading all of these comedias, these plays, obviously I reread the work done by Miguel de Cervantes, and he's mostly known by Don Quixote, but he was such a prolific author and has so much great material. And and as I was reading about his work, I was also reading about his life, and came across a piece of information I hadn't heard before, which is that he had fathered a daughter who was, born out of wedlock, and that he had had a very difficult relationship with her. And when I started looking into the academic papers and information that talked about that relationship, um, most of the accounts said, that she had been such a difficult woman and ingrate, and that she had made her father suffer so much. So, in short, she was evil and bad, and he was the victim. And I was thinking, how can a man at that time be the victim when it was women who were wronged? 90% of the time back then, if not 100% of the time. So I started being very curious and looking into that, and I was very fortunate because my dissertation supervisor at the university was an expert on Cervantes. So I told him, well, one of these days, when I finally finish the PhD, I would like to look into this. So can you give me some bibliography for me to have some material to get started? And he gave me a suggestion of a biography of Cervantes that really talks in detail about his relationship with his daughter, and some papers, academic articles and stuff. So I had that, saved. And in my spare time, in between projects and stuff, I was reading it and underlining and informing myself. And then I finally came to the conclusion that this woman, his daughter, had been misjudged and misunderstood, and that had anyone else been in her shoes, I don't think they could blame her for being angry at him in the end. And so I decided to tackle this subject. But then I thought, if I do it academically, uh no one's gonna really know, because who's going to be reading a paper on the life of the daughter of Cervantes, but other people who are already interested in Cervantes. And I thought, well, this is such a rich story, and the life of Miguel de Cervantes itself is so interesting that it should be known by more people, and the way to make it known by more people is to turn it into a novel, a piece of historical fiction, where you can really share with a regular, reader, not necessarily an academic, um, what their lives were like, and why they were so remarkable. And so I started toying with the idea, should I not? I was uncertain because I'm Mexican, because I live in Canada. So I was thinking, if I write this in English and as a Mexican, maybe, all of Spain is going to want to hang me from a tree or something, because it's their most important writer. But then I also decided, as a native Spanish speaker, he's also my writer, right? It's my language too. So in the end, I couldn't put it off anymore. I have to say, when I write, I do really get into this process where I hear the characters. It's not witchcraft or magic, but it feels like, like they are real, and they are haunting me, and they are behind me, and I'm doing something, and they come and like, when are you gonna pay attention to me? And I was doing this or that. So um or really this happened, or just a glimpse of things when you understand, oh, this happened because of that I know came from outside, not from inside me. So in the end I was like, okay, I cannot keep escaping this woman. And after her came the others, because I soon realized that if I just told the story of Isabel, it would be incomplete, because Isabel didn't exist in a vacuum. She lived in the house, in her father's house, from the time she was 15, with her aunts, with her cousin. And her father was, coming and going because he traveled a lot, but there was also his wife, who didn't know this child existed. So I was thinking, this is like a telenovela, like the telenovelas I was working in. So how can I not write this story? When I have been a part of the genre on TV so many times, and when the story in itself is so rich in dramatic twists and turns that are already there, they just need to be told. So I finally decided I'm going to do this, and I started working on it. I looked for obviously for guidance. I always try to, when I set out to do something, especially something as challenging as this, I did a lot of research. I went and took a course in historical fiction writing, so I could learn how to apply my research and make it into a fiction. How, because I didn't want for this to be an academic book at all, but I had to convey the information. The facts had to be there. So how do you do that without sounding boring? So it took a lot of work, a lot of deleting and rewriting. I think I must have written the first pages of that book over 10 times, maybe. I was obsessed with it. And the pandemic gave me the chance to really dive into it and see where it went. It took, as I said, a lot of research. I went to Spain. I traveled to Spain. I got a grant from the Canada Council for the Arts. Thank you, Canada Council for the Arts. So I traveled to Spain on my own for 10 days. I rented a car, went to see the places where Cervantes had lived, talked to people, brought back a lot of books, a lot of photos. I had a notebook in which I described and I captured, things I saw, smells, sounds, things that I could use, down road for the book. And then it was a matter of really putting myself in the shoes of the characters, the way I did every time when I was an actor, and imagining what it must have been like to wear those clothes, to be in those rooms, to be living across that river where the slaughterhouse was. And registering all those sensory things, I think, was so important to me. I wanted for this book to be somehow like an immersive experience, so that the reader could really imagine themselves strolling down those streets. And then I thought it was perfect because, we were going through a pandemic. And when Isabel de Cervantes went to live with her father, it was also through a pandemic. Her mom had died of the plague. So it was, Madrid was suffering from the plague, all of Spain, really, from 1599 to 1603 or so. People were dying on the street, and it was terrible. So I was thinking it's the perfect, uh, you know, crossing of situations. Me having been a soap opera actress, writing a book in a structure that is soap operatic as well, and writing about a pandemic at a time of a pandemic. about a daughter and her relationship to her father, which is something I could understand really well because I was very close to my dad, so I could, draw from that experience as well. So I thought it was like all of the stars, aligned for me to be able to write this. But it was a lot of work. It was, at some point in the middle of it, I was like, why did I do this to myself? Will I ever be done? How is this going to go? And but the show must go on, and theater gives you the discipline. You start something, you finish it, and you see it until the end.